No one spoke when Rafael Santoro entered a room. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. Even the air seemed to freeze, as if the city itself understood that the most feared man in Chicago had just arrived. But tonight, someone didn't freeze. And that single mistake, or miracle, would begin the slow collapse of an empire and the rebirth of two broken souls who had forgotten what it meant to feel human. Because the woman who refused to fear him was never meant to meet him at all. 2 weeks earlier, Elena Rivera woke at 4 a.m. in a one-room apartment that barely deserved to be called home. The walls were cracked, the heater groaned like an old man in pain, and the winter wind slipped through the broken window frame as if invited. She slept 4 hours a night. Sometimes 3. Every day she worked 3 jobs. Washing dishes at dawn, cleaning offices in the afternoon, and waitressing at night in whatever restaurant would hire someone with no references and no family. Her hands were rough. Her shoes were worn. Her savings were non-existent. But the deepest scar she carried was invisible. Fire had taken everything from her when she was 8. Her parents. Her home. Her childhood. The police called it an electrical accident. Elena remembered the smell of gasoline. She remembered 2 black cars parked outside. She remembered her father begging someone for more time. For 19 years she had carried that memory like a quiet, burning coal inside her chest. And now, fate had decided to light the fire again. Her younger brother Mateo called her that night. His voice was shaking. Someone else grabbed the phone. "You have 2 weeks, the man said calmly. "Your brother owes us $200,000. The line went dead. Elena cried for exactly 60 seconds. Then she wiped her tears and began planning. Because she knew the name behind the voice. Everyone in Chicago knew the name. Rafael Santoro. Lenora Eterna was the most expensive restaurant in the city. Crystal chandeliers. Imported marble floors. Private rooms for politicians and billionaires. And rumors whispered by staff in hushed voices. Rumors about the real owner. The man who never made reservations. The man who never said thank you. The man who could end careers with a glance. Elena applied for a job the next morning. The manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara, studied her quietly during the interview. "Why do you want to work here?" Clara asked. Elena met her gaze. "Because I need money." Clara's eyebrow lifted slightly. Honesty was rare in this place. "You start tomorrow." For 2 weeks Elena became invisible. She memorized staff schedules. Observed security patterns. Watched the private dining room no one entered without permission. Every Friday and Sunday, black luxury cars appeared in the back alley. Men with cold eyes and tailored suits stepped inside. And every time the staff whispered the same name. Santoro. She was ready when he finally arrived. The kitchen froze when word spread. "He's here." Fear spread through the staff like wildfire. No one wanted to serve him. Experienced waiters suddenly became sick. Veteran servers avoided eye contact. The room fell silent. Then Elena spoke. "I'll do it." Every head turned toward the new girl who had been there only 2 weeks. "You don't understand who he is," Clara whispered. Elena straightened her shoulders. "I understand." And she walked toward the lion's den. The private dining room was warm with golden candlelight and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Rafael Santoro sat at the head of the table like a king who had never needed a crown. Black suit. Sharp jaw. Eyes the color of storm clouds. Eyes that had watched too much violence to ever soften again. 2 men sat beside him. One loyal. One dangerous. Elena stepped forward and waited silently. He ignored her for 2 full minutes. A power test. Most people broke in seconds. Elena did not move. Finally he spoke one word. Whiskey. No brand. No details. Another test. Elena studied him carefully. Ink stain on his finger. Slight tension in his jaw. Exhaustion beneath his eyes. "Macallan 25, she said calmly. "Neat. Crystal glass." Silence swallowed the room. For the first time Raphael looked at her. Really looked. "How did you know?" he asked quietly. "You haven't slept in days," she replied. "You need clarity, not comfort." The man beside him laughed nervously. But Raphael didn't laugh. He nodded once. Approval. The game had begun. Dinner continued in tense silence until the second man, drunk and arrogant, grabbed Elena's waist as she poured wine. The room froze. Raphael's voice cut through the air like ice. "Remove your hand." 4 quiet words. The man released her immediately. Elena didn't understand why Raphael had protected her. She only knew the game had changed. Minutes later, Raphael deliberately smashed his glass at her feet. Crystal exploded across the marble floor. "Clean it," he said coldly. Everyone expected tears. Apologies. Begging. Instead, Elena knelt and picked up the shards with bare hands. Blood dripped across the marble. She never flinched. When she stood again, her voice was calm and steady. "Weakness isn't being hurt," she said. "Weakness is hurting others to feel powerful." Silence filled the room. The most feared man in Chicago stared at her as if seeing a ghost. Because for the first time in 20 years, someone had spoken to him without fear. And something inside him, something long frozen, cracked. Raphael raised his hand. Everyone out. The room emptied, leaving only the Mafia King and the girl who refused to fear him. And neither of them realized yet that their lives had just changed forever. The Mafia King's secret, and the girl who shouldn't be alive. The door clicked shut. Silence rushed in like cold water. Elena stood with blood still sliding down her fingers, crystal shards stacked in her palm like proof that she wasn't pretending to be brave. Across from her, Rafael Santoro didn't move. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't order her dragged outside like so many expected. Instead, his storm gray eyes stayed locked on her hands. "Sit," he said. It wasn't a request. Elena's heartbeat kicked hard, but her face stayed calm. She sat at the edge of the chair farthest from him, keeping distance. Not because she was scared, because she was smart. Raphael leaned back slowly, studying her as if she were a rare weapon someone had just placed on his table. "Most people cry," he said, voice flat. "Or beg." Elena lifted her injured hands slightly. "And most people enjoy watching it." For the first time, a flicker crossed his face, so small it could have been imagined. "Interest." He pointed toward her hands. "You're bleeding." Elena didn't look down. "I've bled before." Raphael's gaze sharpened. Not many women talk like that. Not many women look at death and keep their chin up. Elena held his stare. Not many women had to. A long pause. Then Raphael's voice dropped lower, quieter, more dangerous. "Why are you really here?" The question hit like a knife. Elena's lungs tightened for 1 second. She remembered Matteo's screaming voice. The cold threat. The deadline. 2 weeks. She forced herself to breathe. "I need money," she said. Raphael didn't blink. "That's not enough." Elena's eyes didn't move. "It is for someone like me." Raphael leaned forward just a little. The air felt heavier. "You're new," he said softly. 2 weeks. No fear. No tears. And you're smart enough to read my drink like you've known me for years. Elena swallowed the urge to react. He was too sharp. Too experienced. A predator who had survived by sensing lies. She needed to stay inside the truth. "I grew up learning how to read men," she said. "Because if I didn't, I got hurt." The words were real. And that's why Raphael paused. Because he recognized that kind of truth. The kind you couldn't fake. He sat back again. "Name," he said. "Elena." He nodded once like it meant nothing. But then he asked something that felt strange. "Do you have family?" Elena's fingers curled slightly. "Not anymore," she answered. And Raphael's eyes changed. Just a little. Like he understood that kind of emptiness. Elena walked back into the kitchen minutes later with her hands wrapped in a cloth, blood seeping through. Clara's face went pale. "What did he do to you?" Elena shook her head. "Nothing. That's impossible." Elena didn't explain. She couldn't. Not yet. But the kitchen staff stared at her as if she'd survived a tornado. As if she'd stepped into hell and returned with her spine still straight. That night, when her shift ended, Clara pulled her aside. "Listen," Clara whispered. "That man doesn't bring people into his orbit unless he has a reason." Elena met her gaze. "I know." Clara's voice dropped even lower. "Be careful. Because once he decides you belong to him, he doesn't let go." Elena left the restaurant with that warning burning in her ears. Outside, the cold wind slapped her face. She should have gone home. Instead, she walked to the bus stop and checked her phone. No messages from Matteo. No calls. Just silence. And silence was always worse. At 2:17 a.m. her phone rang. Unknown number. Elena answered. Matteo's breathing came through first. Weak. Shaky. Then that same steel-cold voice returned. 2 weeks is generous, Elena. Her blood turned to ice. He knew her name. How do you know? We know everything, the voice said calmly. Your brother begged. Said you'd fix it like you always do. Elena's nails dug into her palm. Please, she forced out. Let me talk to him. A quiet laugh. You can. For 10 seconds. Mateo's voice came through, broken. Lena, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Elena closed her eyes. Where are you? I'm coming. Mateo cried. Don't, Dale. The line snapped dead. Elena stood in the darkness of her apartment with the phone pressed to her ear, staring at nothing. Then she moved. She dropped to her knees and pulled out the old metal box under her bed. The box that held the remains of her life. A burned photograph of her parents. A cheap bracelet that had belonged to her mother. And a police report she'd spent years trying to get. A name circled in red ink. Santoro. She stared at the circle. For 19 years she'd told herself she wanted revenge. But now, it wasn't revenge. It was survival. If Mateo died, she would truly have no one left. And whoever had taken him was connected to the same shadow that had taken her parents. Elena's jaw tightened. Tomorrow she would go back to Lenora Eterna. Not just as a waitress, as bait. As a ghost inside the enemy's palace. The next evening, Rafael Santoro arrived again. But this time, he didn't come alone. The dining room fell into fear the second his men entered. They moved like trained wolves, eyes scanning every corner. And in the middle of them walked Rafael. Cold. Perfect. Untouchable. Elena felt her heartbeat jump, but she didn't show it. Because she wasn't here to be safe. She was here to get answers. Clara grabbed her arm before she could walk forward. No, Clara whispered. Not you again. Elena gently pulled away. He asked for me. Clara's face drained. He what? Elena didn't respond. Because Rafael was already looking at her. And the look wasn't anger. It wasn't hunger. It was something worse. Decision. In the private room, Rafael sat and didn't pretend to ignore her this time. He spoke immediately. You're different, he said. Elena kept her voice neutral. Different doesn't pay my rent. A small pause. Then Rafael slid something across the table. An envelope. Elena didn't touch it right away. What is it? A job, he said. Directly for me. Elena's stomach tightened. What kind of job? His eyes held hers, cold and steady. You will work in one of my properties. Full-time. Protected. Paid well. Elena's throat went dry. Protection from him wasn't safety. It was ownership. Why? She asked carefully. I'm just a waitress. Rafael's gaze sharpened. No, he said. You're not. He leaned forward. I have enemies. People trying to get close to me. Everyone around me is dirty, connected, bought. His voice lowered. I need someone clean. Elena's pulse hammered. Clean. That word. It meant he wanted someone untraceable. Someone without ties. Someone disposable. Or someone he could trust. She didn't know which. But she did know one thing. This could lead her directly to whoever had Mateo. So she forced herself to breathe. And she nodded once. I'll do it. Rafael's eyes narrowed slightly, like he'd expected resistance. You're agreeing too fast. Elena looked at him calmly. I told you, she said. I have nothing to lose. Rafael stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood. He walked toward the window, looking down at Chicago glowing below like a kingdom. And when he spoke again, his voice changed. Softer. Almost tired. Careful, he said quietly. People like me ruin everything we touch. Elena's voice was steady. Then don't touch me, she said. Rafael turned his head slightly. And in his storm-gray eyes, something dangerous flickered. Not rage. Not cruelty. Something that felt like wanting. Before Elena could read it, a guard entered urgently. Boss, the man said. It's Jana. Rafael's face changed instantly. His cold mask cracked. What happened? He demanded. The guard swallowed. She collapsed. The doctor says her heart. Rafael was moving before the sentence even ended. And Elena watched, stunned. Because the ruthless king of Chicago looked terrified. Terrified for someone he loved. Elena followed instinctively into the hallway, staying back. Rafael's men rushed around him, and for the first time Elena saw what lived beneath his icy control. A man with a weakness. A human crack in the monster. And Elena realized something that made her skin go cold. If Rafael had someone he would burn the world for, then his enemies would use that weakness. And if Elena was now working directly for him, she wasn't walking into a job. She was walking into a war. A war where kindness could get you killed, and love could destroy you. The secret behind the Mafia King's cold heart. Hospitals smell like fear. Elena had always believed that. Too many memories. Too many machines. Too many prayers whispered in hallways where hope felt fragile. Now she stood in one of those hallways again, not as a visitor but as someone who had somehow been pulled into the private life of the most dangerous man in Chicago. Rafael Santoro stood at the end of the corridor, motionless. Doctors spoke quietly around him. Guards waited at a distance. Nurses walked faster than usual, sensing tension without knowing why. But Rafael didn't move. His hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Elena watched from across the hall, unsure if she should be there, but unable to leave. Because the man she had seen in the restaurant, the ruthless king, the cold predator, was gone. In his place stood a brother who looked like he might break the world if it took one more thing from him. The doctor stepped forward at last. "She needs surgery," he said carefully. "Soon." Rafael's voice came out low and dangerous. "Then do it." The doctor hesitated. "It's complicated. Risky. The cost." "I don't care about the cost." "I know," the doctor replied softly. "But finding the right donor match could take months." Silence dropped like a stone. "Months?" Rafael's jaw tightened. Elena could almost hear the gears in his mind turning, calculating, searching for a solution money could buy. But some things couldn't be bought. And that was a problem a man like Rafael Santoro had never learned to accept. The doctor nodded politely and walked away. The hallway emptied slowly. Only Rafael and Elena remained. He didn't turn when he spoke. "You shouldn't be here." Elena folded her arms lightly. "You didn't tell me to leave." Rafael exhaled slowly. A long breath that sounded older than his years. "She's my sister," he said quietly. "Yana." Elena nodded. "You love her." He finally turned. His eyes sharpened slightly as if he wasn't used to people saying things so plainly. "She's the only family I have left." Elena's chest tightened. "I know what that feels like." Rafael studied her carefully. "You said you had no family." "I said not anymore." Their eyes held. Two people who understood loss without needing details. Rafael looked away first. "She was born with a weak heart," he said. "My father told me never to love anyone. Said love makes you weak." He gave a quiet, humorless laugh. He was right. Elena shook her head softly. "No. Love makes you human." Rafael didn't respond. But he didn't argue either. And for Rafael Santoro, silence meant more than words. The next morning Elena officially started working for him. His headquarters wasn't the dark criminal fortress she expected. It was a glass tower downtown, sleek, modern, legitimate. Restaurants, hotels, real estate companies. An empire that looked perfectly legal. That was the first thing that unsettled her. Rafael didn't just rule the underworld. He ruled the world above it too. Frankie, Rafael's right hand, walked beside her as they entered the elevator. "You confuse him," Frankie said suddenly. Elena glanced at him. "Good." Frankie chuckled softly. "That's dangerous." "I know." He studied her for a moment. "Most people try to impress him. Or fear him." Elena shrugged. "I do neither." Frankie nodded slowly. "Exactly." Her job seemed simple. Organizing files. Scheduling meetings. Managing communication between Rafael's businesses. Everything looked normal. Until she noticed the coded files. Encrypted emails. Security levels that made no sense for restaurants and hotels. This was the nerve center of a kingdom hidden in plain sight. And Elena was now inside it. Exactly where she needed to be. But danger worked both ways. Because the deeper she moved into Rafael's world, the more he moved into hers. Late that evening, Elena stayed behind to finish paperwork. The office was quiet, dark, empty. Except for Rafael's office door, slightly open. She didn't mean to look, but she did. And she saw him sitting at his desk, sleeves rolled up, staring at a photograph. His expression wasn't cold. It wasn't powerful. It was soft. Elena knocked gently. Rafael looked up quickly, mask sliding back into place. "You're still here. So are you." He leaned back in his chair. "Work never ends." Elena nodded toward the photo. "Is that Jana?" Rafael hesitated. Then nodded once. "She hates hospitals," he said quietly. "Always has." Elena stepped closer without thinking. "She'll be okay." Rafael's eyes met hers. "You don't know that." "No," Elena admitted. "But she has you. And you don't lose." The words slipped out before she realized their weight. Rafael stared at her for a long moment. "You think I'm invincible. I think you're terrified of losing her." Silence stretched. Then Rafael said something that surprised them both. "I am." The admission hung between them like fragile glass. Elena's voice softened. You don't have to carry everything alone. Raphael's gaze darkened slightly. That's exactly what I have to do. Days passed. Work turned into routine. Routine turned into conversations. Conversations turned into quiet understanding. Raphael never flirted. Never complimented her. But he began asking if she had eaten. She was tired. If she needed a ride home. Small things. Care disguised as practicality. Protection disguised as efficiency. And Elena noticed. So did Frankie. You're softening him, Frankie muttered one evening. Elena didn't answer. Because she felt it too. The slow shift. The dangerous pull. The way Raphael's eyes lingered 1 second longer than before. The way silence between them stopped feeling uncomfortable. This was the beginning of something fragile. And fragile things were the most dangerous in Raphael's world. 1 week later, everything shattered. Frankie burst into Raphael's office without knocking. Boss. We have a problem. Raphael stood instantly. What? Frankie looked at Elena briefly, hesitation flashing across his face. Say it, Raphael ordered. Frankie swallowed. Sal Greco is missing. Elena felt her stomach drop. The drunk man from the restaurant. The one who grabbed her. The one Raphael didn't trust. Raphael's voice turned to ice. When? This morning. His house was empty. Guards gone. Security cameras wiped. Silence thickened. Then Frankie said the words that froze Elena's blood. And we intercepted a message. Raphael's eyes darkened. From who? Frankie hesitated again. From the men holding Elena's brother. The world stopped. Raphael turned slowly toward her. You have a brother? It wasn't a question. Elena's heart pounded. Her secret. Her reason. Exposed. Raphael's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. They're using him to get to me. Elena's throat tightened. Yes. Silence exploded between them. Raphael ran a hand down his face, anger flashing like lightning behind his eyes. They've been inside my world this entire time. Elena stepped forward, voice shaking but strong. They're the same people who killed my parents. Raphael froze. Everything changed in that second. Because the war he had just stepped into was now personal for both of them. And neither of them would walk away from it alive. The war that turned enemies into destiny. The room fell silent after Elena's confession. They killed my parents. Raphael didn't speak for a long time. The city lights glowed behind him, but his face was shadowed, unreadable, calculating, dangerous. You came to my restaurant to get close to me, he said finally. Not angry. Not surprised. Just certain. Elena didn't lie. Yes. Frankie shifted uncomfortably near the door, but Raphael raised a hand. Stay. His eyes stayed locked on Elena. You believed I was responsible. I believed someone in your world was. Raphael studied her face like a puzzle finally revealing its shape. You risked your life to save your brother. Elena swallowed. He's all I have left. Raphael's jaw tightened. Not anymore, he said quietly. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Both of them felt the weight of what he had just said. Because it sounded less like a promise, and more like a confession. Frankie broke the silence. Boss, the message came with coordinates. Raphael's eyes hardened instantly. The Mafia King returned. Prepare the cars. Elena stepped forward. I'm coming. No. It wasn't harsh. It was protective. Elena shook her head. They took my brother because of me. I'm not staying behind. Raphael's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. I don't protect people who disobey me. Elena met his gaze without fear. Then stop protecting me. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Frankie quietly left the room to give orders. Raphael and Elena stood alone again. You don't understand what happens in places like that, he said. Elena's voice was steady. I understand fear. I understand loss. And I understand that if I stay here while you fight my battle, I'll never forgive myself. Raphael stared at her. Long. Silent. Then he exhaled slowly. Stay behind me, he said. It was the closest thing to permission she would ever get. The warehouse stood on the edge of the river, abandoned and silent. Black cars rolled to a stop like predators circling prey. Raphael stepped out first. The night air felt sharp with danger. Elena followed close behind, heart pounding but steps steady. This was the world she had stepped into the moment she accepted Raphael's offer. No turning back. The warehouse doors creaked open. Inside dim lights flickered. And in the center of the room, tied to a chair, sat Mateo. Alive. Elena's breath left her lungs in a rush. Mateo. He looked up, eyes wide. Lena. A slow clap echoed from the shadows. Sal Greco stepped forward. Alive. Smiling. You really thought I was stupid enough to stay loyal to Santoro forever? He sneered. Raphael's voice turned deadly calm. You kidnapped a civilian to bait me. Sal laughed. I kidnapped the girl who wormed her way into your life. Elena's blood turned cold. Sal's gaze slid toward her. You ruined everything. You were supposed to be weak. Raphael stepped forward, placing himself between them. Release the boy, he said. Sal smirked. You know I won't. Gunmen appeared from the shadows. The trap snapped shut. Frankie cursed under his breath. Raphael didn't flinch. Last chance, Raphael said quietly. Sal raised his gun. The world exploded into chaos. Shots echoed. Men shouted. Glass shattered. Elena dropped behind a crate, heart racing. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't a story. This was war. Raphael moved like a storm, precise, controlled, unstoppable. Every movement calculated. Every shot deliberate. Within minutes, silence fell again. Smoke curled through the air. Sal Greco stood alone, gun trembling in his hand. Raphael walked toward him slowly. You betrayed my family, Raphael said. Sal laughed weakly. You don't have family. Raphael's voice dropped to a whisper. I do now. The gunshot echoed once. Then silence. The war was over. Elena rushed to Mateo, hands shaking as she untied him. He pulled her into a tight hug. I thought I'd never see you again. You will always see me again, she whispered. Behind them, Raphael stood quietly watching. Not intruding. Not claiming. Just making sure they were safe. Elena turned to him slowly. You saved him. Raphael shook his head. You did. You walked into my world and refused to break. Their eyes held. The city lights reflected in his storm-gray gaze. I warned you, he said softly. People like me ruin everything we touch. Elena stepped closer. Maybe, she said gently. But you also protect what you love. Raphael's breath caught. Love. A word he had buried years ago. Elena reached for his hand. The same hand that ruled an empire, that commanded fear, that had never known gentleness. And she held it. You're not alone anymore, she said. Raphael closed his eyes for one brief second. The cold king of Chicago let himself feel warmth again. And in that quiet moment, the war ended. The healing began. Because the girl who stood up to the Mafia boss had become the one person he would burn the world to protect.